evening. My name is Minister Johnny Banks Sr. I'm the Executive Director of A Knock at Midnight and the pastor of Wayside Chapel. I have with me Philip Bradley, who's the CEO of Nonviolence Works, and we are back again just to continue our conversation as we continue to peruse through the 8 steps of nonviolence, and we continue to talk about also some of the events that's going on in the city of Chicago right now. Come on, welcome yourself to the people, to the show tonight, Phil.
And thank you, and it's always good to be part of public education, because that's what it's all about. How do we educate each other and become better citizens because of it? I'm glad we're talking about nonviolence, because as you know, we live in a very violent communities, and it's only 7 out of the 77, but where is violence, there's also trauma, and it's also a problem, and we got to solve those problems. And it's solvable. You got to replace it with something, because everyone is asking what to do. How can we solve it? What to do?
Absolutely.
But you can't solve violence without a counter response, and the only thing that can do it is nonviolence. But if you don't know the steps, you can't do it. So last week we talked about observation, and so we're going to go into step 2, which is investigation. After you see something, it's not just enough to say you see it.
Absolutely.
You have to ask a series of questions to verify. What are you looking at? What is going on here? But it's not just from a superficial standpoint.
Yeah.
It's getting to the bottom of what you see, because for many of us, you may have been in a situation before that you saw something, reported out what you saw, and then upon further investigation, it wasn't like you said. Not that you're a liar, you just didn't do enough investigation to verify your observation. And so that's the next step to nonviolence, that you see something, and then you need to look into the why is it going on, what do you understand why it's going on, the history of the problem, the purpose of the problem, the cause of the problem. It's a body of information you need to know so you are making an accurate observation. I don't care if you're looking at yourself or just looking at another human being. You have to do an investigation upon seeing something.
Absolutely. And if we go back to last week, you got to tell the truth about what you see. Most of us, in our observation, we won't tell the truth about what we see. So investigating a situation when you won't tell the truth about what you're looking at makes it very, very difficult. And it is interesting that historically, African American people, we have been taught facts but not truth. So we full of facts. We got facts on every topic known to man. But when you start peeling back those facts and start dealing with the truth, then we are numbed by the truth, because we didn't even understand it from the perspective. And that's what investigation is all about. Getting to a truth that you have now told the truth about what you see. Now getting to the truth about how that came to be. To investigate it, you know, and I think that when we talk about that, Phil, you know, it's one of the more important things about this is getting the information correct based on what you see.
That's right. And even with that, nonviolence deal with my journey with truth. That's what Mahatma Gandhi dealt with. How do this truth lead me to this other truth, to this other truth? And you just follow the truth. You don't just follow what you imagine. You don't follow the lie or believe the social lie. You start to follow the truth. So you see something and start asking a series of questions with truthful answers. So now you're looking at it from really a different perspective.
Right. And so when we start talking about victimization and we start talking about the traumatization that follows that, well, first of all, we got to tell the truth about the victimization.
That's right.
And either we are allowing it to happen or we're participating in it happening. It's the only way. If you're going to be a victim, and you're either participating in something that puts you in a position to be a victim, or you're participating in victimizing somebody else, which causes you to have to actually become a victim yourself.
That's right.
Because in order to imprison another person, you really have to imprison yourself.
That's correct.
So it's really telling the truth, audience, just about what we're dealing with when it comes to violence. We can talk about the silence. That's a part of it, but that's not the totality of it, because people have not been saying anything for years. So what is it that we are dealing with that if we investigate it thoroughly, we'll come to a conclusion that we need to change some things because of the findings of what we have sought to see. Listen, my name is Minister Banks. This is Phil Bradley. We're just sitting here having a living room discussion around violence prevention. Dealing with nonviolence, the 8 steps of nonviolence, how does it work? And Phil, if you could just go into a little more detail about this whole notion of investigating a problem. How does that look?
Right. When you look at any problem, there are actually 6 different dynamics at play when you look at it. And you have to really respond from all positions. So which means you have to really take time. Say even if you have a young person, say let's take your own child, and your child did a conduct unusual, you need to observe that and then ask a series of questions before you jump on the child, before you think he's doing something crazy, let me whoop him. You can't whoop people out of crazy, but you can solve the problem. Nonviolence solve the problem, but you can't whoop out crazy. Okay, so before you jump to any false conclusions, ask a series of questions. What's the purpose of this problem? What's causing this problem? What's the history of this problem? How long it's been going on? Who's involved? And then you start developing either hurt feelings. Either you may think you got something to do with it, or you think you incapable of solving it. So you have to get past that problem.
Absolutely.
So then you can make a coherent next step. But you have to at least start with asking a series of questions about what you see. One of the things that violence require is that you can't say you saw it and don't ask questions. Whenever violence go on, there's two things required. Don't act like it just happened, and don't make no suggestions. Okay?
Absolutely.
Violence requires this for it to be violence. And so we've been taught violence. So we've been taught not to make observations. Children are seen but not heard. We've been taught not to tell. You know, we've been taught in all kind of ways. Don't tell on your brother. All kind of ways, no snitch clause.
Yeah. What happened in here, stay in here.
What happened in here, stay in here. I don't care if it's sexual abuse, mental abuse, spiritual abuse, it stays in here. And so we've been trained, but we have to do some unlearning so we can learn the alternative. So the steps there, so it's 8 steps to nonviolence. And the first step is observation. So you have to say you saw it. Let me give you a historical context from it. Lynchings went on in America for years. Thousands of people were lynched, and it wouldn't stop because one of the things that kept creating the lynching was you can't say you saw it. Part of the fear factor was don't report it.
Absolutely.
It wasn't until we had the courage to say a man got lynched now the process can start of solving the problem. But even now, let's fast forward to present day. Crime is going on, but we go look for witnesses. There are no witnesses. There's no observers. There's no one who can make an observation. The problem can't even begin to get solved. Okay? So if the step one to solving violence is where are the observers and who's asking a series of logical questions so we can get to problem solving.
Because the governmental response historically has been, especially when criminality shows up, is to lock it up. But now the jails are burgeoning with people. Many of them are innocent, should have never been there. But that was the response, was to lock it up, not go through a series of questions.
Right.
Okay, this person did X crime. Why?
Right.
What's the causation?
Right.
Is it socioeconomic?
Right.
Is it his background? Is it where he came from? Is he stealing because he's hungry? Or is he stealing because he's a criminal? Why is he doing or she doing what they are doing? And once you dig into that and start to investigate it, you can see that this person does not need to be incarcerated.
That's correct.
Or this person has been wrongly accused. Or a series of other truths show up that you can start to examine even further to help this person become an advocate for what you say he did. Or what you say she did, because the truth showed up.
The truth showed up.
You know.
And with truth come responsibility and accountability, which means then it can become institutionalized. So what is the church response to violence? What's the truth to that? What's the church, how are they accountable to some of this violence? What's the truth to that? What's the government response to violence? What's the truth of that? How are they accountable to some of this? What's the truth to that? What's business response to violence? What's the truth of that? What's the accountability to that? And as we go through these institutions and ask a truthful question to how they are being either part of or could be part of the problem or they're part of the solution.
Yeah. And
let's be truthful about that. Because in the end, we're going to need these institutions to be part of this resurrection process.
That's right.
And that's what nonviolence is. You can be mad with the church, you can blame the church for being part of the problem, or we can now frame it and show them how to be part of the solution. The government has definitely been part of the problem. They've been killing Indians, enslaving black people. Obviously, they've been part of the problem. They've been promoting, letting criminals go free or call law. Yeah, but how do we now make them part of the solution? They've been making money off death. There's a death syndrome. There's a profit margin and people dying. There's no profit in people being prosperous. You know, where's the profit? Is it in the killing of people or the vitality of people? Well, we have to change that.
Absolutely.
See, we have, and that's what nonviolence brings, a different dialogue to how do we create a nonviolent economy versus a violent one. What is a nonviolent government? How does that look? What is a nonviolent church? How does that look? But it starts with, we have to start making observations and tell the truth.
Right, right. And when you start talking about the whole thing about investigation, you know, it's actually invested in the truth. That's really all it is.
It's an investment.
Will you invest in a truth and then be ready to deal with it no matter what comes out of this truth?
Right.
And a lot of times we don't want to deal with the truth because it's not the truth that we have already conjured up that it should be.
That's right.
You know,
right.
so we struggling in many facets of our existence because we won't deal with the truth. Whether it's relationships, we won't deal with the truth. We live in a country that was built on marriage. Now marriage is, nobody wants to be married anymore.
Right.
Nobody cares about that. But the whole system of America is built on marriage.
Right.
And it's built on two
Right.
people doing something
A masculine,
together.
feminine aspect, the yin and
Absolutely.
the yang.
You know,
and
and so when you investigate
right.
that, you find that if you just investigate marriage, you find out that this was a healthy, happy, vibrant African American community when we were 70, 80% marriage.
Sure.
Now that we're down to 20 to 25% marriage, we got violence, we got exploitation, we got murder, we got mutilization, we got people who love themselves outwardly but hate themselves inwardly. We got confusion about the sexes. We got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And it's because the institution that brings forth everybody else into these other institutions called marriage, nobody believes it anymore.
That's right. That's right.
You know, and so how could you believe an investigative report when you don't believe that what can sustain you
Right. Right.
doesn't make any sense anymore?
That's right. That's
And
right.
it just doesn't, you know.
That's right.
It makes no sense at all. And so we struggling, audience. We struggling trying to work through the steps of. We're not struggling working through the steps, but understanding what comes out of it. When you start talking about investigating, looking at your own self. When was the last time you did an inventory of your own life and told the truth about why you are not successful? Don't blame it on white people. Don't blame it on. Don't create a blame list. Tell the truth about why you are not successful. Don't put systemic racism in it. Just tell the truth about why you are not successful. What decisions did you make that you know if you didn't make those decisions, your life would look 100% different than the way it looks right now?
That's right.
You know, and these are the things that we have to investigate because before I can solve an outward problem, I got to solve some of these inner problems.
Inner problems, right.
And that's where that investigation come in. And like I said, we could use another word. When you take an inventory of your own self and tell the truth with nobody else in it because your observations are absolutely correct, you just won't tell the truth about them.
Right, and we see it all the time, and even in the court of law. Something happened. Everybody thought they saw it on television or saw it in a screen called the tape or video, and it goes to court. And between cross-examination or an investigation, what you saw is some variables that you have to consider other than just what you went by, what you saw.
Absolutely.
There's a series of questions that had to get answered.
Absolutely.
To determine if it was just, you know, and so just looking at a picture, it can give you 1,000 words, but don't give you 1,000 answers.
Right.
Okay.
Here's a good example. If we are at the point where violence has created traumatization, if a person commits a crime under a catatonic, traumatized state, are they a criminal or do they have a mental health problem?
Right.
We got to tell the truth about that.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
that takes
yeah,
the truth. So we go, is the person a criminal?
Right.
Or do they have a mental illness?
That's right.
A mental health issue?
That's right.
Which one is it? Because we got to decide.
Right.
Because we can't keep locking it up.
That's right.
You know, because we won't go into solving the problem. Okay, we keep saying, and all of the programs and different stuff are trauma-based and trauma-informed and trauma this and trauma that. They're only talking about black folks.
Right. And
No.
and I'm glad you brought that up because I had to the privilege of working along with Reverend Williams, Anthony Williams, State Rep. LaShawn Ford, Camille Lilly, and Rep. Hernandez, who crafted a resolution to declare violence a disease, a mental health problem that requires a mental health response and not just a police response. And so that's right where that resolution is. And we're about to now go into the legislation, putting the components in place where agencies have to start responding to violence and the aftermath of violence as a mental health issue.
All right, and audience, when we say mental health, don't say crazy.
It's not right.
We're talking about mentally unstable,
Right.
mentally impacted, so that your decision making
Yeah, stresses.
can be
Yeah.
off somewhat, causing you to make bad decisions or causing you to do actions that you wouldn't normally do if you were healthy.
That's right.
And it's based on experiences of trauma or it's based on experiences of violence, so the experts say. And I'm going to go along with the experts. Let's say
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah,
And if that's true, how you going to keep locking up mentally ill people?
Right.
The word on the streets is that Cook County Jail is the biggest mental institution in the country.
Yeah.
Now, they say this as a joke, but they keep locking up and throwing
Right,
people in
right,
there.
right.
And what people deem is a mental health epidemic right on 26 in California.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
And without any mental health response to the joke.
Right.
Okay, so is that the truth you telling? You just joking? Is that, why are you making the truth a joke? And isn't your response to that as violent as the action that the person committed?
That's what we're talking about.
See, now you taking victims and turning them into villains, and you now...
And now you perpetuate
And you
it.
perpetuating the problem, and then send them back out into the streets without any mental health services rendered after you declare them mentally.
And
See, and this is where the legislation and the response of the citizen has to change.
And Phil, I have enough empathy to make this statement. And I could be wrong, audience, but I'll make this statement. If the criminality is mental health based, that's the issue. And the people that's charged with governing these people, which are law enforcement officers, then if they keep committing suicide themselves, well, just in New York, there were 6 peace officers that committed suicide right behind each other.
Right, sure.
So if they are committing suicide, trying to enforce the law,
Right.
there's something got to be wrong with the law.
Right. And this thing, even when we deal with the homicide rate,
Yeah.
the suicide rate is actually higher than the homicide rate. And we chasing the homicide rate, but we overlook the number of American citizens who just take their own lives
Absolutely.
in their own hands and didn't kill anybody but themselves out of a mental health. And let's put it on a whole nother level. When you have unresolved issues and unresolved needs that don't get met, it can be self-destructive if you don't get some help. If you don't get some help. If you don't get heard, get your needs met, get your issues resolved, you can go from being a villain to victimizing yourself or victimizing other people, and there becomes a syndrome. And so we're trying to break this syndrome of how we stop the cycle of this mental health catastrophe that we do have. But let me give you another example, Pastor Banks. If white America don't understand it, and I think they understand it better than most, because most of them have therapists and go see a therapist, and you would just have to imagine the number of whites who just go check in and have someone to talk to about their issues, that if they didn't have that service and can get that need met, what would the white community look like?
Absolutely.
See,
Absolutely.
without this influx of therapists and services and people to talk to and life coaches, and these are people highly educated, well-to-do, got resources, and life is still stressing them out. And they have taken some unresolved issues that need to close doors.
Absolutely.
So just imagine people on a whole nother class, whole nother scale, less education, less economics, the social stresses that can come up on them without any output of any way to get it out.
Absolutely.
Other than to implode, okay, or to explode.
Yeah.
And that's what you get.
There's no outlet. And let me give a good example. In another analogy, if a person goes to a 12-step program,
Very good.
Okay?
Very good.
Let's say they go to a 12-step program, and they have an addiction or alcoholism. If they stay there 20 years and don't work through the process, they will be walking around with untreated addiction or untreated alcoholism, which means they would exhibit the same behaviors as a person that's not drinking or not using drugs because they did not get the therapeutic value from the process.
That's right.
And so we are seeing, as we do the investigation, there's a therapeutic value to this truth.
This is truth, right?
You know, there's some evidence. It's evident that if you can get the therapeutic value out of your own investigation, it will help you.
It help you focus.
Yeah.
It change your perception. It help you zero in on the true problem.
Okay.
See.
Yeah.
Because you saw it in a blur. Now you have to ask a question to zero in. Now you can see exactly. You can examine it now. It's like an X-ray. You can see deep into the to the problem, and that's what we're not deep thinkers. If you watch the news, it's not just watch and hear the blurb. You have to then ask a series of questions.
Yes.
To help you understand what you just heard and what you just saw before you go. And that's what violence is. Violence is, I see something, I'm jumping on you. I see something, I ask you some questions, I'm jumping on you. No, nonviolence, it takes 8 steps. And the interesting thing about nonviolence, the 7th step is confrontation. So confrontation is going to happen, but that's the 7th step. It's not the first thing you do. It's not the second thing you do.
Absolutely.
It's not the third thing you do. It's the 7th thing you do. So before a confrontation shows up, it's 6 other steps you have to do to even feel justified in the confrontation. To even be in the confrontation.
Absolutely.
Even as the nonviolent person to be in the confrontation.
Absolutely.
Okay? It's 6 things you have to go through to get to this confrontation. But without knowing the steps, confrontation will be the first thing you do. Without knowing the steps, confrontation we just see.
Yeah.
So let's understand there's 8 steps to nonviolence. And step 2, which we're talking about tonight, is do an investigation. And the first word is invest. You gotta take and put something into what you're seeing so you can get something out of it.
Absolutely.
And many people don't want to be witnesses, observers, can give a testimony. They saw it, or even honestly are trying to aid and abet the citizenry and law enforcement in fighting crime, because it takes courageous citizens to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, audience, you know our time goes exponentially fast. These 30 minutes are very fast. Phil and I are sitting here, like I said, we're having a living room discussion, and we're going to continue our discussion in the coming weeks. Next week we'll be on the third step, which is purification. What is the whole purification process when violence has overcome you?
That's right.
And it has actually taken something out of you.
That's right.
How do you get it back in? There's a process for that. So our first step, we dealt with observation. Second step is investigation. The third step is purification. And there's 5 other steps. So it's going to take us another 6 weeks. We're going to take our time. So if you're watching, you'll have a full understanding of what we're talking about. If anybody that's viewing, if you'd like for Phil or myself or both of us, come to your church or community organization and do some nonviolence training, be more than happy. You can call myself at 312-918-8819, or Phil, they can call you at
312-513-7876.
Either number can get both of us, and we'll be more than happy to come out and work with you, because this is a dynamic that is not in a school book. It is not. It is in the hearts and minds of Mr. Phil Bradley and myself, as taught by the Reverend Dr. James Elver to us while he was yet here on this earth. Listen, we just thank you all for viewing and allowing us to share, come into your living room, into your home, and talk about something that we believe can make a change in your lives, and absolutely make a change and make a difference in this country.
That's right.
We just thank you for all you do. Please believe that in the darkest hour, truth and knowledge is the way. Thank you and good night.